Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
1966. Genie on a magic carpet. Leading to the first meeting. It was a Friday, the last day of the work week in early September. I was on my summer job as a secretary clerk to help pay for my upcoming semester's college expenses. My lunch break was almost over. As I hurried past the New York Public Library on 5th Avenue and 42nd Street, I was engulfed in the large crowd swarming across the metropolis. Young secretaries in high heels laughed together as they strolled along. Somber businessmen in pinstripes strode purposefully as their leather briefcase swayed by their sides. A young couple vehemently argued as they walked through a red light. Groups of teenagers darted artfully across the busy intersection while cars and trucks sped by. And no one looked twice at the old woman mumbling to herself. This was life in the big city, which on that day disturbed me to no end. I had been dissatisfied for several weeks, not knowing why. I had been trying to ignore the vague but penetrating questions drifting in and out of my mind. But on that Friday, they shouted at me, "Where are we all really going? Where are we really coming from? What does it all mean? What is the point of it all?" A few days later, I was sitting at my parents' home in the Bronx, leafing through the pages of Life magazine. The photos somehow no longer looked like photos of living people, but of clones or robots. Struggling with a sense of the world's futility and falsity, I turned to my mother and asked, "Do I have to become like these adults? Do I have to dress up and wear lipstick, go to work, and then, after all is said and done, die? And that's it?" "Of course not, dear," my mother calmly answered, not even slightly distracted from watching her TV program. I felt like a misfit. Question after question surfaced. Was I alive before I was in my mother's womb? Do I have a form only now? Or did I have an identity before this birth? Thoughts like these plagued me throughout the next day and increased when I went home to relax in front of the TV. As I watched a panel discussion between a group of psychologists, anthropologists, clergymen, and philosophy professors on the subject of death and dying, I was dismayed when they admitted directly or indirectly that they had no clear idea what happens after death. Later that evening, I asked my mother, "Mom, if I wasn't born from you, would I still exist?" "Well, I don't know," she stuttered. I guess so." It occurred to me that she had no answers, and that few people do. I wondered, where can I find the answers to these questions? By mid-September, my summer job was over and I returned to school. I was 19 years old and just beginning my sophomore year at City College of New York. I planned to major in art and history. Like many of my fellow students and friends, I was politically conscious to a certain degree. I wanted to change the world and redefine the political and social realities of the day. My dream was of a world free from oppression, so I joined a left-wing political group and picketed against the Vietnam War. Though I was part of the 1960s youth culture, I also felt estranged from it. I felt like I was watching a TV show in which I played a fictitious part. In a sense, it was like I wasn't really there. Yet, I took certain things very seriously. My friends and I strove to reach a kind of utopian reality through the use of mind-expanding drugs like LSD and marijuana. We hoped this would somehow change the world. My aim was to achieve a sense of oneness with the universe. Even though each LSD trip ended in depression, I always experienced a few beautiful moments when the world appeared astonishingly colorful and profound, with ever-changing visions that seemed to indicate a higher reality. I came to believe that my new animated imaginary perceptions of the world were an ultimate truth in itself, and that I was the orchestrator of that reality. I came to believe that I was not my body, but instead some kind of all-pervading it, the supreme creator and controller of everything around me. I alternated between being God Almighty and a depressed girl from the Bronx. I had a few outfits in my closet that I thought would help me look more like God, and I wore them on appropriate occasions. My favorite was a 1920s style long beige dress and black cape. And I also liked wearing my well-worn jeans and either an olive green or maroon turtleneck. These were colors and styles considered transcendental by my peers. Such was the course of my life until one Thursday afternoon in mid-November. Intending to buy a large quantity of LSD, I withdrew the few $100s saved from my summer job. My plan was to sell most of the acid to make my money back with profit, and I would keep some for my own use. The previous time I did this, I was cheated, ending up with plain sugar cubes instead of LSD. To recoup my losses, I played a similar ruse on my own customers. I didn't want this to happen again, so I took care to ensure that this new dealer was the real deal. I met him at a party, and he seemed honest. I arranged to meet him outside an apartment on the Lower East Side. When I arrived, he said he didn't want to attract attention. He told me to give him the money and wait outside while he went upstairs to get the LSD. I waited for what felt like hours, until finally someone in a neighboring apartment told me he'd seen the man going down the back fire escape. I was devastated. My whole summer paycheck was gone. My entire 2 months at a job I hated was wasted. I was burning alive in my anger towards a man I didn't know, and I certainly couldn't go to the police. Isn't there anyone out there who can help me? I shouted in a whisper. My plea seemed to reflect a greater urgency. My life wasn't developing into the utopian ideal I had hoped for. I bought a new pair of knee-high black leather boots to cheer myself up. But this didn't help. A few days later, I decided to visit my boyfriend who lived in the East Village. Boarding the IRT train, I made the journey downtown once again. On my way, I remembered the recent drug deal turned bad, and my life in general, causing me to ask myself, if I'm all-knowing, why am I so gullible? Tossed back and forth on the subway seat, I stared at my own reflection in the grimy window, trying, as it were, to see my soul in the glass. All I saw was blackness as the train entered a tunnel and shot along the darkened tracks. I silently called out, "Who am I really? If I'm the cause of everything, if I'm in some sense God, why can't I control anything? Why can't I just mentally transport myself downtown rather than taking this disgusting train?" Emerging from the subway system, I walked to 9th Street, heading towards Tompkins Square Park. It was a large park, stretching several blocks. It was the centerpiece of its eclectic neighborhood in the middle of the East Village. It was a famous playground and a personal backyard of sorts for hippies and counterculture intellectuals to smoke marijuana, discuss left-wing politics, play music, and get to know each other. It was a place where I, too, had spent many an evening looking for happiness. On this occasion, I had no intention of casually socializing with anyone. My depression weighed on me so heavily that I hurried through the park, anxious to reach my boyfriend's house. I heard the guitars twanging, bongo drums beating their African rhythms, and transistor radios blasting the sounds of the famous mid-60s rock bands, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, Jefferson Airplane, Bob Dylan, and Joan Baez, among others. I regularly sheltered in this conglomerate of sounds. But that day, I simply wanted peace from my own mind. All of a sudden, a very different sound attracted my attention. It was soft and hypnotic, exotic in some sense, and yet hauntingly familiar. Something buried deep inside of me responded to it. That old sound is emerging again. I had no idea what I meant. I had to find the source of the music. It wasn't difficult, for halfway into the park, a large crowd had formed around some central spectacle. Gathering to listen were elderly European men dressed in old-fashioned suits and European women in fancy kerchiefs and heavy sweaters. Throngs of American and Puerto Rican children also joined the crowd, and stray dogs too. Everyone seemed to focus on this sound and where it was coming from. I was inwardly pulled in that direction of the crowd, not realizing that what I was about to see and hear would change my life forever.
Hare Krishna,